I hope the sellers out there heard that, because ultimately their goal is to get every single penny they feel they deserve for their home.
Absolutely.
And if you can eliminate any potential roadblocks or barriers to that by being fully transparent with exactly what's going on, it sets you well on the course to be able to achieve what your goal is.
We're looking at putting a picture together where people can envision how the house is supposed to be lived in. The person who sees this as a toy room and says, well, there's no dining space. We need to show them that there's the dining space there so people can really envision what it's like supposed to be lived in.
Seeing the looks on my buyers' faces if we walk into a home that maybe is not particularly clean or particularly tidy, and you just see all the second thoughts and doubts kind of start to spiral in their mind.
What actually creates value when selling a home today? So today we're going to talk about 7 key things that you as a home seller need to strongly consider doing for getting your house on the market. And stay tuned. At the end, we're going to talk about the thing that you should almost never consider doing unless it is absolutely essential. Now, this list of items is going to be a combination of things that require a little bit of work. Some require strategy and thinking. But at the core, the goal is to keep your costs low to ensure that your net profit goes up. So keep that in mind as we go through this list. They are in no particular order. They're all important, but you have to figure out the one that's the right fit for you. So I'm Todd Hilton, and once again, to my left is my colleague, Andrea Hilton, who is going to be talking from, she's laughing because she's also my wife, my business partner, my best friend, all that other jack of all trades. She's going to be talking about the seller's perspective of these items. And our colleague and great friend, Anthony Field, he's going to be talking from a buyer's perspective. So you need to stay tuned today because this is a list that will be really, really helpful for you as you're getting your home ready to sell. So let's crack right in to the list. Number 1, in no particular order. No, let's not. I don't want to get into the list yet. I want to talk about one thing before we do that.
Okay.
One thing. The wait and see. Before we get started, what have you seen are roadblocks for people that are considering to sell? What confuses the process for them, Andrea?
People don't know where to start. Sometimes they've been in their house for a really long time. They don't know if they should be changing this or doing that. They don't know what to keep. They don't know what to get rid of. They're not sure where to start. They don't know where to price it. They just don't know where to start. So if we can give them some steps and take it one step at a time, and again, not necessarily in a particular order, take it one step at a time, it'll make things a lot clearer for them and a lot less stressful.
So keyword of that, clarity, and it's essential. So Anthony, from a buyer's perspective, what are sort of the minimum expectations of a buyer when they go on a viewing? What is that sort of minimum thing that the house should be in this condition or shape? What is that?
I think from a bare minimum standpoint, and it sounds very simple, but it really just comes down to cleanliness and tidiness. It can have such a big impact, and I've witnessed it so many times. Seeing the looks on my buyers' faces if we walk into a home that maybe is not particularly clean or particularly tidy, and you just see all the second thoughts and doubts kind of start to spiral in their mind. They're starting to think, well, if the sellers couldn't have been bothered to clean this or to tidy this up, what else could be wrong? What could be lying under the surface? So again, it's a very quick and relatively easy thing to do, but just making sure you are clean and tidy and your home is as presentable as it possibly can be.
That is some really great advice. So we're going to get into the 7 items now that you as a seller need to be thinking about to get your house ready to sell. So in no particular order, number 1 of 7, minor touch-ups and repairs. So Andrea, what repairs should sellers definitely make before listing their home?
minor repairs and touch ups are super important. If I'm going in and I'm seeing a broken window, um, again, to Anthony's point, what else is wrong? Make sure that you're going to fix that window. If you've got, your kids were roller skating and somebody kicked the wall and you've got a hole in the wall, make sure you're going to repair that. Missing trim, I see it all the time. Put the trim up. It's relatively inexpensive and it makes your home look more finished. If your light fixtures are kind of hanging by a thread, you want to do those kinds of things. Any necessary repairs. So if you've got a faucet that leaks constantly, you may want to get that fixed. Again, it's probably not a huge costly repair, but it does go a long way in presenting your house in its best possible light. The last thing I would say, potentially, if your paint is chipped all over, and I see this a lot, like a front door that's got the paint peeling off.
Or
Um,
dog's been
or
jumping
the
on it.
dog's been scratching at it. You walk in, you close the door, and then that's what you see. You really, might want to take care of that. Anything that is going to be relatively low cost, but really speaks to the maintenance of the house, take care of that.
That's great advice. So, Anthony, there may be sellers out there that are saying, well, if you call them small repairs and they're relatively small, why can't the buyer just do it for themselves when they purchase? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that is a great question. And anytime a buyer's going into a home, they're already starting to kind of keep track of and look at the various things that they may need to tackle. So, sure, on one hand, a seller could argue that, oh, the buyer can take care of all of these things. But if there are already things that maybe need to be done, for example, if there are some bigger ticket items like you have older windows, you have older shingles, you have the furnaces maybe in need of replacement, and then in addition to that, you have all of these smaller things. It really starts to add up very, very quickly from a buyer's perspective. And I think additionally, from a buyer's perspective, it can start to create thoughts of, well, how motivated is this seller? How willing to negotiate is this seller? And if we were to get an offer accepted, be it conditional or firm, how smooth is this entire process going to go if the buyer has the impression that the seller didn't necessarily begin that venture in the proper place?
Small issues create bigger doubts. That's great advice, Anthony. Absolutely. So, number 2 of 7, declutter, depersonalize, and have a pre-packing strategy. So, Andrea, I'm a seller. What do you mean? How do I declutter before selling? What exactly does that mean?
Mhm. And that is a conversation that I have on repeat. So any of my clients will concur. Um, Anything that is really only personal to you and is taking up space. So you've got that massive collection of Elvis dolls, and you love them dearly. Um, Maybe it's time to pack them up for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want everyone touching them. Two, you want, if they're not an Elvis lover, I know they should be, but if they're not an Elvis lover, um, they're going to be looking at that and be distracted by those things. So depersonalizing and decluttering can mean the same thing, but sometimes we just have stuff. Like we have too much stuff. So it's a good time for us to say, what stuff do I not need? I may not need 87 cushions that I bought at 15 different occasions. It's time for you to declutter those, take those away. If you still have too many, it's a really good starting point for you to start your packing. You're going to pack it up anyway because your goal is to move. Your house will be sold. You don't want to be packing everything frantically. So the things that are not going to give um, a positive impression of your house can get packed up. We can label it. We can put them in Rubbermaid bins or totes and pack them up, label them. We're going to stack them neatly, either in a storage facility or a corner of the garage that's not going to affect the flow. Because when somebody comes into your house and it's too personal, they can't picture themselves there. They're trying to figure out who lives in this house. So you really want it to look like anyone can live there.
Great advice. So if you pack it and store it in, say, for example, a storage unit, Elvis truly has left the building at that
Elvis
point.
has left
So
the
I had to
building,
throw it.
yes. Yeah.
I had
And it's not only your Elvis knickknacks that we need to pack away, okay?
Fair enough.
Just an example.
So it's just a continuation on that. So now that I've got my house ready to list, what are sort of the 2 or 3 things that I should do before each viewing to make sure that my home is showing great right now?
Yeah, you want to make sure, and this is something that we don't talk enough about, smells in the home. So if you have cooked a very aromatic meal, you want to make sure that you've got the exhaust fan going. You might want to open the windows for that. Um, don't overpower it with one of those plug-in scent because it looks like you're trying to hide something, but maybe have a nice fresh spray that you use. Or maybe if you know you've got a listing coming up, maybe make sure that we're not getting so aromatic in what we're cooking. Obviously, you want to make sure that your beds are made, your floors are swept, the counter is cleaned off. You have no idea how important it is for people to walk in and see clean counters. So get the dishes put away. Take that toaster that you're not using right now off, put it in the cupboard. Just make it look as clean and tidy as possible.
Great advice. So Anthony, when a home feels still too personal to the seller and still too lived in, how can that impact sort of that first initial response of a buyer when they see this whole family story of another family in front of them?
Yeah, it can definitely be a little more difficult, I think, for a buyer to truly visualize themselves in there. I think not only in my experience can it be a little difficult during the showing, but I think afterwards, reflecting on the showing and thinking back and, what exactly did the rec room look like? And all you can see in your mind is the Elvis dolls, like things of like that. I think it can have a big impact. I have seen it happen before. I think even additionally, I can think of examples where I was showing a home that had been on the market for a little while. It wasn't a hot new listing by any means. And so we're in the home and we're seeing it very, very personalized to that family. And I think my buyers just began to be doubtful that they would really be able to negotiate. I think it almost showed a little too much pride of ownership or too much, perhaps that the sellers had a little too much sentimental value in the home and maybe wouldn't really be realistic at coming together and reaching an agreement at a price that truly made sense. So there really are a few ways in which that kind of clutter and additional noise can really impact things from the buyer's perspective.
And we've all been part of, as real estate professionals, we've all been part of viewings where photos of the family have sort of hijacked the viewing, where, we're going through, the person is in a process of visualizing this home as theirs, and then all of a sudden they're distracted by, hey, I went to high school with that guy or whatever else. And it completely changes the focus of why we're there. We then begin to think about when's the last time I saw him or whatever, as opposed to, can I picture my family living here?
Now you're picturing somebody else's life in that house.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of personal photos do. Oh, he's a skier or he's you know what I mean? Like you got all those family photos up there and people do start picturing the family that lives there instead of it being their home and them living there.
Absolutely. Great points. So number 3 of 7, deep clean and fresh neutral paint. So Andrea, how clean should a home be, and sort of what are the best paint tones that you would recommend?
Yeah. Deep clean is really important. We all have corners of our house that we neglect. There are, if you have carpet or if you have a lot of furniture in your house, obviously certain things cling to that, certain odors cling to that. Do a deep clean. So make sure your floors are clean. Make sure your baseboards are clean. It just presents the house so much better. Make sure those smells that are in the furniture or in the carpet have been addressed. Because when a house smells clean, people feel better about it. And I don't mean make it smell like an antiseptic. I mean make it smell clean. Make sure you get those things out. Um, and paint colors are important. Um, you want to stay away from the ones that are too personal. I love that teal blue accent wall. And I also love that mauve accent wall I have in the other room, but it doesn't meet everyone's taste. So, my suggestions are let's make it neutral. Let's take it to a neutral tone, maybe a similar tone throughout the whole house. Something else to consider too is how much natural light comes in. So if you've got very limited natural light coming into the house and you're going, though it's neutral, you're going with a darker shade of gray or taupe or something. That may not be the best presentation for your house. So if you are going to be painting, consider the lighting that's coming in, and if it's not a huge amount of light, maybe go on a lighter tone. I'm not saying white because white can be stark as well, but let's take it to a relatively light, neutral tone.
That's great advice. Recently, I was on a viewing with some clients of mine, and it was almost in the luxury market sort of price range. And a formal dining room is important to my clients. And I know we walked in and the color was beautiful. It was a beautiful color, but it was extremely dark. And my clients couldn't get away from the fact that this was too small of a room. Now, when you actually looked at the square footage, it wasn't a small dining room, but it felt claustrophobic to them. It felt uncomfortable to them. It felt cold to them. So if they're picturing family holidays and dinners around that table and having a extended family there, those two things didn't jive with what they were feeling in that room. So that was a perfect example where that seller lost those people in that room because they went with a personal choice, beautiful color, but it didn't work for the room. So great advice. So next, lighting, number 4 of 7, lighting and fixtures. So Andrea, what is the best lighting for showings? Like what's optimal?
Yeah, you want something that's going to mirror natural light. So sometimes people will have a really dim lighting and put a dimmer switch in, but maybe go to an LED light bulb that's going to really give you the light that you need. Especially in um, areas that aren't terribly well naturally lit, but places like bathrooms or dressing rooms. If your lighting is not bright enough, people are thinking about, oh, I want to be able to, get prepared in the morning. I need to have good lighting. So making sure that you've got clean white bulbs or LED lighting is going to give you the best, best light. If it's important for you to not have, that bright light all the time, you can always do a dimmer switch. But as far as lighting fixtures and stuff goes, I mean, it's got to be what goes with the house. But when we're talking about actual lighting, your lamps, make sure your lamp shades are clean. No, honestly, if you've got great lighting and then they've put this lovely LED light in and the lampshade is full of dust, it's going to affect the lighting in the room.
Good point.
It's going to affect the overall impression. So your lamps, your ceiling fixture lights, all should be. And another thing I got to say, you have no idea how many times I go into a home and there's a fixture with 3 bulbs and you flip it on and only 1 bulb works. It looks like the house is in disrepair. No, you just need a light bulb change. So make sure all of your light bulbs work. So there's no question as to whether the fixture doesn't work or whether you just have a burnt out light bulb, but also to give the best light to the room.
I mean, that's a great point. So we here in Northern Ontario have long winters, so it's dark soon.
Yeah.
And that's an important piece of it. Now, what if you have the good fortune of having great natural sunlight based on how your home is positioned? How would you optimize that?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously, when you want to show your house, you're going to have those curtains drawn or open. But you still have evening showings, right? So you're going to have those curtains open. You're going to make sure that your windows are clean because that natural light can flood in, and you're going to see all the fingerprints and streaks and the nose prints from your pets. So you want to make sure clean those windows, open the drapes, open the blinds. But again, you still need to have good lighting because that house is going to be shown in the evening as well, right? So make sure that all of your light bulbs are in working order, and make sure you have nice white light typically.
Great point. So, Anthony, from a buyer's perspective, buyers don't come back and sort of suggest, hey, I don't like the lights in there. But how does the overall lighting impact a viewing and someone's impression of the house when they're there?
Well, it definitely does have an impact. Actually, each of you made really good points to this too, and what I was thinking, and that it's not necessarily that a buyer walks into a home that is properly lit and has, nice neutral paint and everything and goes, wow, what, nice lighting and nice neutral color on the wall. But they really notice when those things are not there. To your
Yeah.
point, Todd, you had your story about the dining room and with the dark colors and everything. Like those are the takeaways that the buyers are going to leave the house with. So again, it's just making sure that you're highlighting your home as well as you possibly can for what it is, because while you might not get bonus points for adequate lighting and for making sure that every light bulb is actually not burnt out, you will certainly lose points in a buyer's mind if they can see that these things have not been cared for. And we've mentioned this a couple of times, but it just keeps going back to, well, if they haven't been able to replace those light bulbs, what else could there be?
Great point.
Mhm.
Great point. So, number 5 of 7, and this is a term that's often confused by what we see on HGTV or whatever. It's home staging. So, I'm not necessarily talking about sort of furniture rentals. I'm talking about other things. So, what is home staging in those other terms, and how important is it to a quick and easy sale?
Yeah. Home staging is super important, first of all. And yes, one way of doing home staging is bringing in a whole house full of furniture. But let's face it, the majority of the homes that we're selling have furnishings in them. So, what we want to do is optimize the flow of the home so that your buyers can see how the house is going to work. So if you have too much furniture, we're going to pare some of that down, or we're going to move it to a different place. Or I see this pretty often. A lot of times, um, a seller, because it fits their needs, they don't want a formal dining room, so that's the kids' toy room. Well, we're going to stage that back to a dining room because this is meant as a dining room, and people have to see the flow of the house. Or we've got some people who take the formal living room and they make that their giant dining room, because they've got a living room on the lower level or a rec room. Well, the guy who's um, buying that house might be looking at it and saying, "Oh, there's no living space on the upper floor. That's never going to work when my parents come to visit because we have nowhere to relax. They can't go downstairs." So one of the big things in staging is looking at the flow of the house and how the house was meant to be lived in, and make sure we put those things in place. We don't want to have too much furniture. We don't want to have, to walk sideways past things. So we're looking at the flow of traffic through the house. We're looking at putting a picture together where people can envision how the house is supposed to be lived in, because the guy who wants to make this a toy room is going to do it anyway. But the person who sees this as a toy room and says, well, there's no dining space, we need to show them that there's the dining space there. And similarly, a lot of times somebody has 4 bedrooms and they don't use all of the bedrooms, so they have 3 offices. Well, we want to show, yeah, you can use one of these as an office, but let's make the bedrooms look like bedrooms. Let's make the flow go nicely, and let's put some artwork that accentuates the wall space that we have, so people can really envision what it's like supposed to be lived in.
Perfect. So, Anthony, for a home that shows well, there's two real key elements. A, how does it actually attract more buyer viewings from your perspective? And secondly, how does it positively impact those viewings based on the feeling that the buyers have when they're there?
Yeah, when a home shows well, I mean, it just instills that additional confidence right off the bat. And that begins before you even enter the home. Like that begins when these buyers are just looking at the photos online. When they're reading the listing description, and they can tell that it wasn't something that was just thrown into AI and not proofread afterwards, right? Like they can tell, and again, it all comes down to being able to appreciate the effort that a seller or the selling agent put into this listing. So, I see it all the time where people will reach out and they want to see the home with the nice, pretty looking photos. And I get it, you totally understand it. In addition to that, it's a great way to get people, buyers, to want to look at something that might be actually priced at the very top end of their budget. It can be a great way to get buyers to maybe consider looking at a home in an area that they previously weren't really looking in, if it is, that appealing looking of a listing. So ultimately, these are all great things for a seller and for a selling agent, because everything that you can do to make the listing more appealing from the very beginning is just going to drive more traffic through that home, which ultimately is more than likely going to result in a more favorable selling price.
I mean, we also see it on sort of the other end. When we are able to do a video tour of something that shows impeccably, the quick response that we see. So I'm thinking of one in my head that was on Manitoulin Island. It had beautiful red cedar on the outside. The interior was impeccable. Some of our clients and people who follow us are like, I know the one he's talking about.
Yeah.
The response was unbelievable. It sold in a couple days in multiple offers in sort of a luxury price range. And we are able to see from the back end what those preparations did for that seller, because people went wild over that video because they loved it so much. Absolutely. Yeah. So number 6 of 7, a pre-listing inspection. So Andrea, what is that? And when should a seller consider doing it?
Yeah, a pre-listing inspection is when you actually call in a home inspector to come in, do the inspection on the house, give that report that you can then share with buyers. There's a couple of times when I recommend that. A lot of times if a house is older, and we think people are going to have a lot of questions about it, but we really know that the maintenance has been well kept up, or we want to know if there's maintenance we have to do, we're going to do that pre-listing inspection. Oftentimes you will see a house and you have a pretty good idea. The house looks pretty good. We're probably going to have multiple offers. Let's eliminate some of the stress of having to wait for your buyer to bring in a home inspector and put more conditions into the offer. Let's do the home inspection to make it easier on our potential buyer, but to make our process less stressful as well. A couple other reasons that people might do a pre-inspection: they've had some work done, that there's evidence of the work that was done, or the house was listed 5 years ago and there was a big problem with it that was fairly well known to the agents locally. I might suggest, hey, you've rectified that problem. Let's have a home inspection so we can put all of these people's minds at ease. So there's a few different instances when I really do recommend a pre-listing home inspection. It's never a bad idea to make that part of your package.
Great advice. Great advice. So Anthony, how does it change the mindset of a buyer when there's that pre-inspection report? And we'll talk about 2 scenarios. One, where it actually brings up some items that are important to note. And 2, when it's a clean report. How does that sort of change things in both those scenarios?
Yeah, it definitely changes things from a buyer's perspective. I agree with what Andrea just said, and that it's never a bad idea, because in my experience, seeing the way my buyers react when they message me and say, hey, that home that you just emailed me, we really like it. We think we want to see it. And then I reply with, okay, great. Also, I'm going to send you an email copy of they had a home inspection already done. I'm going to send you a copy of that through email. Mm-hmm. It just instills that much more confidence. So to your question, Todd, to start, if there are a couple of little issues that have been found in the inspection report, it gives a sense in the buyer's mind that these sellers are trying to be as transparent as they possibly can. And that just does so much for the level of trust that a buyer's able to put into it. I think if you were to have two identical inspection reports, say one done on behalf of a buyer after their offer had been accepted versus one that was done from the seller previously, I think a buyer is going to find the seller's pre-inspection more favorable because it just speaks to that level of transparency. I think a buyer's that much more willing and able to want to negotiate in terms of reaching a deal with these sellers if they, knowing full well that there were some things that might come up in an inspection report that were not very desirable, we're still willing to do that and to provide that. So it's the level of trust, that would maybe allow a buyer to think, okay, we're willing to maybe see this through a little bit further than we would have otherwise. And then going back to a clean inspection report or something where there's not really any sort of real issues, that's a great way to likely push some buyers to maybe go a little bit closer to, if not right to, their pre-approval maximum amount, because, we've mentioned this before, but it just takes out the guesswork. They can go in with that much more confidence, feeling fairly certain that they're not going to have any sort of big ticket items come up. They're not going to have any sort of unexpected expense that'll, cost them thousands of dollars in the near future. So, all that to say, I think it's always a good idea, and my buyers tend to really appreciate anytime they see a pre-inspection report available.
Yeah.
Great point. I hope the sellers out there heard that, because it creates, ultimately their goal is to get every single penny they feel they deserve for their home.
Absolutely.
And if you can eliminate any potential roadblocks or barriers to that by being fully transparent with exactly what's going on, it sets you well on the course to be able to achieve what your goal is. So, number 7 of 7, selecting the right realtor. Now, we've all heard of scenarios where my cousin Jimmy's neighbor's kid is a realtor. I'm going to list with him. Maybe not a great idea, although Jimmy could be great for all we know.
Great guy.
So why does it matter in selecting the right realtor, both personally and from a success perspective?
It is a really important step. I mean, you're dealing with one of your biggest investments, and you want to get your best return on that. So there are so many different aspects to selecting the right realtor. It's not it shouldn't be the guy who comes in and tells you the highest price, because that might not be the most realistic. You have to be able you have to have a relationship with them. Most of my clients have become friends, or their comments afterwards I just feel like we're friends. You have to have that rapport. You have to have somebody that you can ask open and honest questions for and expect an open, honest response. You have to have somebody who understands what your end goal is, and somebody who's willing to work to get you to that end goal. You want somebody whose marketing plan aligns with what your end goal is. So somebody that is going to is not going to skimp on the marketing aspect of it, who's going to showcase your house in the best light, who's basically going to work for you. You want somebody who understands the market. The first point that they're going to do is tell you how to get your house prepared. Well, you need to feel comfortable that they really know how to do that, that they have the resources and the people to help you do that if there are things that need to be done that you can't do. You want somebody who understands pricing. They understand what your market value is. They're not trying to sell you a bill of goods and say, I can get you this much money, when no one else in the neighborhood has ever gotten anywhere near that, because that's not realistic. They need to understand what the neighborhood is, how your house compares in that neighborhood, and give you a realistic goal. The worst thing that can happen is somebody comes in and they say, I can get you so much more money than those other realtors have told you that I can get. And in 3 weeks, you're having a conversation and saying, yeah, we got to bring the price down a little bit. And in 4 weeks, we're saying, yeah, we got to bring the price down a little bit. And you're no longer happy when you get the top end of market value because your guy told you so much higher than market value that you're actually disappointed. Whereas if you had a realistic expectation of what your house's market value is, so you know the low end, you know the high end. If you had a realistic expectation of that, then when you got that or close to that, you're not disappointed. You had a realistic expectation from the outset.
Great point. Now, Anthony, buyers have agents and representatives too. And believe it or not, there are still some people that believe that, well, I call the person on the sign because that's how it works. What should a buyer be looking for in a representative, and why is it important that they have the right one?
It's very, very important that they have the right representative as far as, if you're looking to buy a home, which agent you're choosing to assist you and represent you in that. So, realistically, and myself, I work with a lot of first-time home buyers. So as we know, that first-time home buyer budget can be fiercely competitive, particularly in a spring or a summer market. So yeah, in a perfect world, you might see 1 or 2 houses, offer on one, and successfully purchase it, and that's great. Realistically, that's not really the case. So we're likely going to be spending quite a bit of time together. That's where it's important to make sure that you're choosing somebody that you think you can really build that rapport with, somebody that you can truthfully, aside from the professional aspect, but just get along with, somebody that you enjoy or can at least tolerate, their company. So that's really, really crucial. And then in addition to how well you get along, making sure that you're picking somebody who is, who listens to you, who knows what you want, and who cares and is not just viewing you as another transaction, who's not going to try to, say, bully you into buying a home in a neighborhood that you're not interested in, simply because, it fits within your budget. And then to your point, Todd, and I see this all the time and hear it all the time as well. People say, oh yeah, we called the listing agent. It just made the most sense. By the time that you see that for sale sign on the lawn of that home, that listing agent is already contractually obligated to work in the best interests of the seller. So why are you as a buyer wanting to put your faith and your trust in somebody who, before they've even spoken with you once, has already told the seller, I'm going to do everything I can in my power to work in your best interests, which, as we know, often means get you as much money for your home as possible, right? So we have two kind of conflicting sides here, which is why it can make a lot of sense to work with an agent who is not currently the one representing the seller of that home.
Great point. Great point. So those are our 7 tips. Now, as we promised at the beginning, we're also going to talk about the one that you should almost never consider doing unless absolutely essential, and that is a major renovation before listing. So, Andrea, why is that a bad idea of someone wanting to do a major overhaul?
Yeah, I always talk to people who, to clients who come to me and say, listen, I am thinking of selling my house, but I want to put a brand new kitchen in. I want to do all the countertops and I want to do all of the flooring throughout the house because I've been meaning to do that for 15 years. You've been meaning to do that for 15 years for the enjoyment of yourself. But if your cabinets are in adequate shape and you just don't like the look of them, and if your countertops are in adequate shape, they just don't meet what your ideal look is, and if your flooring is not torn apart and it's in adequate shape, you're going to spend that money. So you might spend $30,000, $40,000 putting in your kitchen and redoing the flooring throughout your whole house. And that's not going to get you a $40,000 return on your investment. So not only is it not going to get you what you put into it, it may not increase the value of your house significantly. So you have a market value for your home. Your home is in move-in ready condition as it is already. You just don't like those finishes. You've spent that money. And it's not for your own personal enjoyment. You spent that money for someone else's enjoyment, and it's not bringing you any more money back. Likewise, I've had people say, I can finish that bathroom for $10,000, and what's that going to do for the value of my house? And yeah, the bathroom was kind of dingy, and so yeah, freshening it up might be a good idea. But if you spend $10,000 and you only get $10,000 more, um, you have no more positive equity, but you've taken the time and the stress of being under renovation, and the money you put in your pocket is exactly the same. So I see scenarios a lot of times where people want to spend money that's actually coming out of their pocket and not going back in, not even replenishing itself, or people who are taking money out just to put the same exact money back in. So it's really important not to undergo that huge renovation to your own personal taste, unless it's for your own personal enjoyment while you live in the house. When you're about to sell the house, if it doesn't bring more money into your pocket at the end of the day, I would recommend not doing it.
Great point. And so for our viewers out there, Anthony, they're probably thinking, well, what type of buyer wouldn't want something new or renovated? Is there a roadblock that they need to think about there?
Well, I mean, buyers do love everything new and renovated. Of course they do. But again, going back to Andrea's point, can you actually see a return on investment, make your money back? There are a couple of factors, I think. So one could be the price point of that home, right? If it's a home that might be listed, say, between $350,000 and $400,000, then putting in a nice, beautiful new executive kitchen likely is not the play, because your buyers are probably not really in a position to want to pay that much more for that much nicer of a kitchen in that price point. Now, that could change a little bit if you do have a much nicer home that is just, the kitchen is the one thing that is maybe a little bit more outdated. And if you're in a nicer neighborhood, then maybe to kind of bring that up to the level of kitchens within that neighborhood from similar sales. So the price point of the home, I think, matters in terms of what you want to do for your repairs. But I also think location is important. As we know, there are a number of areas, say in the South End, where buyers have a certain expectation for a certain level of quality within a home and within a property. And that doesn't necessarily translate to other areas of greater Sudbury. So, knowing where you are, for example, I was talking with a potential client in the Valley just a little bit ago. And, he was asking me things that he could do. And I noticed that his garage could kind of use a little bit of upkeep. The average buyer in the Valley wants and appreciates a garage and the quality of the garage. And is it, a real garage, or is it more of just kind of a shed in the backyard, right? So again, knowing where you are and what buyers want from that specific location, I think makes a huge difference for determining which sort of improvements are actually worth making.
That is awesome, awesome advice. So those are our 7 things that sellers really should think about doing before hitting the market. And the one that they really need to think long and hard about before entering into, because it is really about net profit and money in your pocket, as opposed to being able to brag about a list price. So thank you to our industry experts, Andrea Hilton and Anthony Field. And until next time, let's hope that our advice today will lead to a meaningful move for you.